She sat in her aging sedan, her hands clutching the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. Martha Thomas had spent weeks selecting the perfect outfit, a modest blue dress with lace trim that had cost her 3 months of savings. From her parking spot across from the towering stone spires of the cathedral, she watched as limousines deposited guests in designer suits and flowing gowns in every color of the rainbow. Then came the bridal car. As Julia stepped out, Martha's breath caught in her throat. Her daughter looked beautiful but vacant, like a porcelain doll being carefully arranged for display. When a pair of security guards spotted Martha's car and began approaching with purpose, she placed a small, velvet-wrapped gift box on the passenger seat, started the engine, and drove away without protest. A single tear, hot and silent, rolled down her cheek. This is the story of a mother's silent departure, a daughter's golden cage, and the unbreakable bond that would ultimately save them both. Martha Thomas had never intended to be a single mother. When she married Frank at 23, she envisioned a partnership, a love that would last forever. She could still remember the day she told him she was pregnant. His brown eyes had lit up, and he'd swung her around their tiny apartment kitchen, promising to be the best father a child could ever want. For the first 7 years, he kept that promise. Frank would come home from his construction job with small treasures for Julia, a pretty rock, a wildflower, once even a tiny kitten they named Whiskers. Martha would watch from the kitchen doorway as Frank and Julia played board games on the living room floor, Julia's laughter filling their modest home like music. Then came the layoffs. Frank's construction company downsized, and suddenly, the man who had always prided himself on providing for his family couldn't find work. The rejection letters piled up, and with them, Frank's drinking increased. Martha picked up extra shifts to cover the bills, but each time she came home exhausted, she'd find Frank on the couch, empty bottles at his feet, the light in his eyes dimmer than the day before. "I'm sorry," he'd slur, his voice thick with shame. "I'll try harder tomorrow." But tomorrow became next week, and then next month. Until one morning, Martha woke to find his side of the bed empty. His clothes were gone from the dresser, and his wedding ring sat on the kitchen table, a cold, golden circle next to a hastily scrawled note, "You both deserve better." No goodbye to Julia. No forwarding address. Just gone. Julia was inconsolable for weeks. She'd sit by the window every evening, waiting for her father's truck to pull into the driveway. "When is Daddy coming home?" she'd ask, night after night. Martha would hold her close, rocking her gently. "I don't know, sweetheart," was all she could say, because how do you tell a 7-year-old child that her hero had abandoned them? That was when Martha started working 3 jobs. The mortgage was in her name, and she was determined not to lose their home, the only stability Julia had left. Mornings at the school cafeteria meant she could see Julia during lunch, slipping her an extra cookie when no one was looking. Evenings cleaning office buildings meant leaving Julia with Mrs. Henderson next door, an elderly widow who taught Julia to knit while Martha vacuumed corporate hallways until midnight. Weekends as a home health aide for elderly patients meant bringing Julia along, where the old folks doted on her while Martha changed bedding and administered medications. "You're working too hard," Mrs. Henderson would often say, her eyes full of concern as Martha picked up Julia, dark circles etched under her own eyes. "I'm doing what needs to be done," Martha would reply with a tired smile. "Julia's college fund won't fill itself." Because that was Martha's dream for her daughter, education, opportunity, a life without the constant, grinding struggle that defined her own existence. Julia would go to college, have a career, and marry someone who would never, ever abandon her. Martha would make sure of it, even if it broke her in the process. The years passed in a blur of work, sleep, repeat. Julia grew from a heartbroken child into a serious teenager who understood, far too early, the value of hard work. She studied late into the night, determined to earn scholarships to ease her mother's burden. "Mom, you don't have to keep the weekend job," 16-year-old Julia had insisted one Sunday, as Martha rubbed ointment into her cracked, raw hands. "I can get a part-time job after school." Martha had shaken her head firmly. Your job is to study. To get into a good college. That's how you'll help me. When the acceptance letter from State University arrived with a partial scholarship, Martha had cried for the first time since Frank left. They sat at their small kitchen table, Martha's work-worn hands holding Julia's young, smooth ones. "We did it," Martha had whispered. "No, Mom. You did it," Julia had corrected, her own eyes filled with tears. College changed Julia. She bloomed, transforming from a serious, studious girl into a confident young woman. She joined the marketing club, made friends with people from backgrounds far more privileged than her own, and learned to navigate social situations Martha had never experienced. When she'd come home for holidays, Martha noticed the subtle changes. Her speech was more polished, her clothes more expensive looking, though Martha knew they came from thrift stores, her tastes more refined. Martha was proud, if sometimes bewildered by the transformation. This was what she'd wanted, after all, for Julia to rise beyond their circumstances. But sometimes, watching Julia sip tea with her pinky slightly raised, Martha would feel a pang of something like loss. Her daughter was becoming someone she didn't fully recognize. For years later, Martha sat in the back row of the university auditorium, watching Julia walk across the stage to receive her diploma in marketing. With honors. Martha wore her best dress, a navy blue number she'd found at Goodwill and carefully altered herself. Her hands, rough and reddened from years of cleaning chemicals, clapped until they stung. That night, over a celebration dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant she'd saved 6 months for, Julia shared her news. "Mom, I got a job offer from Livingston Marketing in the city." Martha's fork paused midway to her mouth. "The city? That's 3 hours away." Julia nodded, excitement radiating from her face. "The starting salary is amazing. I can finally help you, Mom. I can send money home every month. You can cut back on your work, maybe even just keep the school job." Martha's throat tightened. Of course, Julia would move away. That was the natural order of things. It's what she'd sacrificed for. "I'm so proud of you," Martha said, her voice thick with emotion as she reached across to squeeze Julia's hand. She didn't mention the sudden, cavernous emptiness she felt at the thought of returning to their small house alone. Julia moved to the city a month later. True to her word, she sent money home monthly, but Martha banked all of it. "For your future," she'd say when Julia asked why she wouldn't use it to ease her workload. The truth was, Martha didn't know how to slow down anymore. Work had defined her existence for so long that the thought of free time terrified her. What would she even do with herself? 2 years passed. Julia's calls became less frequent as she climbed the corporate ladder. When they did speak, Julia would talk excitedly about campaigns she was working on, colleagues she admired, the vibrant pulse of city life. Martha would listen, offering encouraging words while struggling to understand this world so different from her own. Then came the call that changed everything. "Mom," Julia's voice trembled with excitement over the phone. "I met someone. His name was Connor Wilson. He was 32, a Harvard Business School graduate, and the heir to Wilson Pharmaceuticals, a company worth billions. They'd met at a charity gala where Julia was representing her marketing firm. "He's amazing, Mom," Julia gushed. "So intelligent and accomplished, and he could have talked to anyone there, but he spent the whole night with me." Martha listened, happiness for her daughter mingling with an inexplicable unease. "He sounds wonderful, sweetheart. When do I get to meet him?" There was a slight pause. "Soon," Julia promised. "He's very busy with the company." But soon stretched into months. Julia would call with updates about their whirlwind relationship, weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard, Broadway shows, dinners at restaurants whose names Martha couldn't pronounce. Yet each time Martha suggested visiting the city or having them come to her home, Julia would find a reason why now wasn't a good time. Until the day Julia called to say they were engaged. "He proposed last night, Mom. At Le Cirque, with a string quartet playing our song." Martha swallowed the hurt of not having met the man who would become her son-in-law. That sounds beautiful, sweetheart. I'm so happy for you. The ring is incredible, Julia continued. 5 carats, Mom. I'm almost embarrassed to wear it, it's so large. Martha thought of her own simple gold band, long since pawned to cover one of Julia's college textbook bills. When's the wedding? I should request time off work. Another pause, longer this time. Well, that's the thing. The Wilsons have a family tradition of large, formal weddings. Connor's mother has already started planning. It's going to be at St. Michael's Cathedral. Black tie. Martha felt her stomach sink. That sounds fancy. It is. And Mom, Julia's voice dropped slightly, Connor's family they're very particular about appearances. Very old money. Very traditional. Martha understood immediately what wasn't being said. She, with her cafeteria hairnet and cleaning uniform, would not fit into this world. I see, she said quietly. I love you, Mom, Julia rushed to add. It's just his mother, Faith, can be difficult. She's already asking so many questions about my background. And what have you told her? Martha asked, dreading the answer. The truth, Julia insisted. That you raised me alone, that you worked hard to put me through college. She has certain expectations about the kind of family Connor should marry into. Martha closed her eyes, feeling a familiar ache, the ache of being deemed not enough. Julia, I would never embarrass you. I know that, Mom. It's not me. It's them. They're just different from us. 3 weeks later, the wedding invitation arrived. Thick cream cardstock with gold embossing, announcing the union of Julia and Thomas and Connor Elliott Wilson. Tucked inside was a handwritten note from Julia. Mom, I can't wait to share my special day with you. Would you mind sitting toward the back of the church? Connor's mother is concerned about balancing family representation in the photographs. Love you so much, Julia. Martha stared at the note, her finger tracing the elegant handwriting that looked nothing like the childish scrawl that had once adorned her Mother's Day cards. She thought of the countless nights she'd gone to bed hungry so Julia could have a full stomach, the winters spent with the thermostat turned low, the shoes she'd worn until they had holes. For the first time, Martha allowed herself to feel a hot surge of anger. Not at Julia, but at a system that could make a woman like her feel like she should be hidden away, ashamed. The next day, Martha called Julia. Hi, Mom, Julia answered, sounding distracted. Can I call you back? I'm in the middle of cake tastings with Faith. This will just take a minute, Martha said, her voice steadier than she felt. I got the invitation in your note. A beat of silence. Oh, right. Look, Mom, I know it's not ideal, but... Julia, Martha interrupted gently. I just want to understand. Am I an embarrassment to you now? No. Julia exclaimed. God, no, Mom. Never. It's just Faith is handling all the arrangements, and she has very specific ideas about how everything should look. The photographer will be taking formal family portraits, and she thinks it would be unbalanced with just you on my side and their entire extended family on Connor's. Martha closed her eyes, absorbing the pain. I see. Please understand, Julia pleaded. This is important for Connor's family. The governor will be there, Mom. Senators. People who can influence Wilson Pharmaceuticals. And a cafeteria worker doesn't quite fit the guest list, Martha finished for her, her voice flat. That's not fair, Julia said, but her voice lacked conviction. Martha took a deep breath, pushing her own hurt aside for the sake of her daughter's happiness. I'll sit wherever you need me to, Julia. I just want you to be happy. Thank you, Mom. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. Always. 2 weeks before the wedding, Martha received 2 unexpected visitors. She had just returned from her evening cleaning job when a sleek black car pulled up outside her modest home. From it emerged a tall, handsome man in an expensive suit and, beside him, an elegant older woman with perfectly coiffed silver hair. Martha recognized Connor immediately from the photos. This must be his mother, Faith Wilson. Martha suddenly wished she wasn't wearing her cleaning uniform, that her house didn't have peeling paint, that she was somehow more. "Mrs. Thomas," Connor said, extending a hand. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm Connor Wilson. This is my mother, Faith." Martha shook his hand, then Faith's, noticing how the older woman barely touched her fingers before withdrawing. "Please, come in. I wasn't expecting visitors, so excuse the mess." There was no mess. Martha kept her home meticulously clean, but the instinct to apologize for her circumstances was automatic. They followed her inside, Faith glancing around with poorly disguised disdain. "What a cozy little place," she remarked, making "cozy" sound like a disease. "Can I offer you some coffee? Tea?" Martha asked, feeling uncomfortable in her own home for the first time she could remember. "No, thank you," Faith replied crisply. "We won't be staying long." Just then, a third figure entered her living room. Julia. Her daughter looked beautiful in an expensive cream dress, but there was a tightness around her eyes, a stiffness in her posture that Martha had never seen before. "Mom," Julia said, her voice oddly formal. "I'm sorry we didn't call first. Connor and Faith wanted to speak with you directly." Martha looked between the three of them, sensing the weight of an unspoken agenda. "About what?" Connor cleared his throat, taking charge. "Mrs. Thomas, we have a situation regarding the wedding. A matter of appearances." Martha's spine stiffened. "I already told Julia I'd sit in the back, if that's what this is about." Faith stepped forward, her pearl necklace gleaming. "Actually, Mrs. Thomas, we're hoping for a bit more discretion than that." "Mother," Connor warned softly, but Faith continued. "The Wilson name carries significant weight. The guest list includes the governor and 3 senators. The wedding has already garnered attention from society publications." She paused, selecting her words like weapons. "We feel your presence might be distracting." Martha looked at Julia, waiting for her daughter to defend her, to express outrage. But Julia said nothing, her eyes fixed on the worn carpet. "You're asking me not to attend my only daughter's wedding?" Martha asked, her voice a strained whisper. "What we're proposing," Connor stepped in, his tone all business, "is a compromise. Wilson Pharmaceuticals is providing Julia and me with a substantial wedding gift, a house in Westchester, fully paid for, and a position for Julia in our corporate marketing department. These gifts are contingent on a wedding that reflects the Wilson family standards." "You're buying my absence," Martha translated, the realization like ice in her veins. "We're ensuring Julia's future," Faith corrected. "A future that, frankly, would not be available to her otherwise." Martha looked again at Julia, who still wouldn't meet her eyes. It was then that Martha noticed something that made her blood run cold, a faint, purplish bruise, partially visible on Julia's wrist, which her daughter quickly covered by pulling down her sleeve. In that instant, Martha understood. This wasn't just about social climbing. Julia was being isolated, controlled. "Julia," Martha said softly, "is this what you want?" Before Julia could answer, Connor placed a hand on her shoulder, his fingers digging in slightly. "Julia understands what's best for our future." Julia finally looked up, her eyes swimming with tears she refused to let fall. "It's just one day, Mom. We can have our own celebration later. Just us." Martha's heart was breaking, but a fierce, protective instinct rose within her. Making a scene now would only push Julia further into Connor's control. Sometimes, silence was the wiser choice. "All right," Martha said quietly, "if that's what you both want." Relief washed over Faith's face. "Wonderful. I'm glad we could reach an understanding. She reached into her designer handbag and withdrew an envelope. This is a small token of our appreciation. Martha didn't touch it. I don't want your money. Don't be proud, Mrs. Thomas, Faith said with a cold smile. Everyone has a price. Not me, Martha replied, her dignity the one thing she refused to surrender. And not my attendance at my daughter's wedding. That should have been my right, not something to be negotiated away. I'm agreeing for Julia's sake, not yours. Connor's jaw tightened, and for a flash, Martha saw something dangerous in his eyes. She recognized it instantly, the same look Frank would get before his temper exploded. She glanced again at Julia's wrist and made her decision. She would step back, but she wouldn't go far. Julia might need her sooner than any of them realized. After they left, Martha sat alone in her quiet house, surrounded by photos of Julia growing up. In every image, she saw the same bright, determined eyes that had been dull and fearful today. I'll always be here, Martha whispered to the photographs. When you need me, I'll be waiting. On the morning of Julia's wedding, Martha woke before dawn. She moved through her quiet house with purpose, selecting the blue dress she'd bought when she still believed she'd be sitting proudly in the front row. She styled her graying hair carefully, applied modest makeup, and fastened her mother's simple pearl earrings, the only heirloom she had to pass down. She would respect the Wilsons' wishes and stay out of sight, but she needed to be near, to send her love to Julia, even from a distance. Martha drove to St. Michael's Cathedral, parking her aging car across the street. As time passed, limousines began to arrive, depositing a parade of the rich and powerful. This was Julia's world now, a world Martha could only observe. You gave her wings, Martha whispered to herself, trying to believe it. But she couldn't shake the memory of Julia's bruised wrist. At precisely 11:30, a stretch limousine with white ribbons pulled up. The driver opened the door, and there was Julia, a vision in white lace. But it was her face that made Martha's chest ache. Behind the professional makeup, her daughter looked hollow. Her smile was fixed, her movements mechanical as a man Martha had never met. Connor's father escorted her toward the cathedral. Martha had brought something with her, a small velvet box containing a silver locket that had belonged to her grandmother. Inside, she'd placed a tiny photo of herself and Julia on graduation day, both of them smiling, full of hope. Along with it, she'd written a note. My dearest Julia, today you begin a new chapter. And while I cannot be beside you, my heart walks with you down that aisle. Remember who you are, my brave, brilliant girl. If you ever need me, for anything, I will be there in an instant. Love is not control or conditions. Love is freedom and support. I love you that way. Always, Mom. As the cathedral doors closed behind Julia, Martha noticed the two security guards approaching her car. They had been posted to watch for her. She made a quick decision. Starting her car, she pulled away, refusing to create a scene. Instead, she drove to the Wilson estate, found an inconspicuous side entrance used by delivery vehicles, and approached a young woman unloading flowers. Excuse me, Martha said gently. I have a gift for the bride. It's very important to her. The florist looked sympathetic. I'm not supposed to. Please, Martha said, her eyes conveying what words couldn't. I'm her mother. The young woman's expression softened. She glanced around, then quickly took the small box. I'll make sure she gets it. Thank you, Martha whispered. It was a thread, a connection to her daughter when everything else had been severed. Days turned into weeks. Martha's calls to Julia went to voicemail. Finally, a month after the wedding, Julia called. Her voice was oddly formal, distant. Did you get my gift? The locket? Martha asked. A long pause. Yes. It was beautiful, Mom. Thank you. Her voice cracked slightly. I keep it in my jewelry box. Not around her neck, Martha noted. I meant what I wrote, Julia. If you need anything. I should go, Julia interrupted quickly. Connor will be home soon, and I need to make sure dinner is ready. The line went dead, leaving Martha staring at the phone, her concern deepening into a cold, hard fear. The calls that followed were infrequent and always followed the same pattern. Julia would speak in a rushed, hesitant voice about surface topics, always ending the call abruptly. She never called from her cell phone anymore, only the house line. 6 months after the wedding, Martha received a call from an unknown number. Mrs. Thomas. You don't know me, but I'm Alexis, Julia's friend from her old firm. Martha clutched the phone. Is Julia all right? I'm worried about her, Alexis admitted. She's withdrawn, she's lost weight, and she acts terrified. Yesterday, she slipped me this note with your number. It just said, call Martha. Tell her I'm fine. That's when I knew she wasn't fine at all. Martha made a decision. Thank you for calling, Alexis. I'm going to visit my daughter. The next day, Martha drove to the address in Westchester. It was a mansion behind wrought iron gates. She pressed the intercom. A formal voice answered. This is Martha Thomas, Julia Wilson's mother. I'd like to see my daughter. After a long wait, the gates slid open. Before she could reach the front door, it opened and Connor stepped out, his smile a practiced, cold mask. Mrs. Thomas. This is an unexpected visit. I want to see Julia. I'm afraid Julia isn't feeling well. Morning sickness. His smile widened. We were going to call you next week. You're going to be a grandmother. A baby. The news hit Martha like a physical blow, another chain to bind Julia to this family. Congratulations, she managed. But I'd still like to see her. As I said, she's resting. Doctor's orders. Connor. Who is it? Julia's voice came from inside. She appeared in the doorway, and Martha barely recognized her. She was thinner, her collarbones protruding, and the light in her eyes was gone. Mom, she looked startled, then glanced quickly at Connor, as if seeking permission. I was worried, Martha said, moving toward her. Connor smoothly stepped between them. Can I at least hug my daughter? Martha asked, her eyes locked with Connor's. He hesitated, then stepped aside. As Martha held her fragile daughter, she whispered, Are you really okay? Julia nodded against her shoulder, but Martha felt a tremor run through her body. As they separated, Julia discreetly slipped a small, folded piece of paper into Martha's hand. I should go lie down, Julia said loudly for Connor's benefit. Once in her car, safely past the gates, Martha unfolded the paper. In shaky handwriting, it read, They're watching everything. The pills they're giving men at normal prenatals. Don't trust them. Martha's blood ran cold. She remembered a small news item about Wilson Pharmaceuticals facing scrutiny over experimental drugs. She knew she had to act, but she had to be smart. That evening, she made a call to an old friend, Angela Rivera, now a detective with the county sheriff's department. Angela, Martha said, her voice trembling, I need your help. It's about my daughter. I think she's in terrible trouble. Life inside the Wilson mansion had become a beautiful prison. Connor controlled every aspect of Julia's life, her friends, her schedule, her phone. The pregnancy had only intensified the surveillance. Faith administered special prenatal supplements each morning, unmarked pills from Wilson Pharmaceuticals. One night, Julia, having pretended to swallow the pills, overheard a chilling conversation between Connor and Faith in the study. She didn't take the morning dose, Faith was saying. The blood test showed no trace of the compound. I handled it, Connor replied coldly. Put a double dose in her water. She can't be allowed to compromise the trial, Mother. Not with everything at stake. Are you sure she's the right candidate? She's becoming resistant. Her genetic profile is perfect, Connor insisted. And now that she's pregnant, we have the ideal testing scenario. The board is expecting results by the 3rd trimester. And if there are complications? Like with Elaine. There was a terrifying pause before Connor responded. Then we'll have learned valuable data either way. That's how science progresses, Mother. Julia retreated to her bedroom, shaking uncontrollably. Elaine. Connor's first wife, who had died during childbirth. A tragedy, he had told her. Now Julia understood. She wasn't a wife, she was a test subject. And her baby was the experiment. Her only hope came during a charity luncheon hosted by Faith. Julia spotted Alexis working for the catering company. In a frantic, whispered exchange in the kitchen, Julia gave her the silver locket her mother had given her. "Give this to my mom," she urged. "And tell her the blue house. Remember. She'll understand." Just then, Faith appeared, her eyes like ice, and escorted Julia away. That night, Connor locked Julia in her bedroom. She was no longer just in a golden cage, she was a prisoner. Curled around her growing belly, she whispered to her unborn child, "I'll get us out of here. Your grandmother will help us. She always finds a way." When Alexis delivered the locket and the message "the blue house," remember, Martha knew it was a desperate cry for help. The blue house was their secret code, an imaginary safe haven they'd created when Julia was a little girl, a place in their minds where nothing bad could ever happen. Working with Detective Angela, Martha had been building a case. They'd uncovered whistleblower complaints, the truth about Connor's first wife's death, and a pattern of Wilson Pharmaceuticals targeting women with specific genetic markers for their illegal Project Genesis trials. Now, it was time to act. The Wilsons' annual charity gala was the perfect cover. Disguised as a server with a gray wig and glasses, Martha infiltrated the mansion. Julia was nowhere to be seen, on bed rest upstairs. Slipping away from the party, Martha found the service elevator and made her way to the 3rd floor. She picked the lock to the master suite. "Julia," she called softly. A rustle came from the bedroom. Julia was sitting on the edge of the bed, pale and thin. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Mom," she whispered. They embraced, a torrent of silent sobs shaking Julia's body. "You came. You really came." "Of course I did," Martha soothed. "Can you walk? We don't have much time." Just as they were about to escape, a commotion erupted downstairs, Angela's diversion. They ran for the service elevator, but Dr. Evans, the company's lead researcher, stepped into the hall. Martha shoved a tea tray into his chest, and they scrambled into the elevator. The elevator opened into the basement. Martha led Julia through a maze of storage rooms to a service tunnel. They were halfway through when the door behind them crashed open. Connor stood there, his face a mask of rage. "Julia! Stop right there." Martha pushed her daughter behind her. "Keep going. That child Julia carries is the culmination of years of research." Connor snarled. "That child is my grandchild," Martha shot back. Suddenly, Julia stepped forward, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "With my testimony, Connor. And the blood samples I've been collecting every time you forced those drugs on me." Connor lunged. Martha reacted instinctively, driving her knee hard into his groin. As he doubled over, she shoved him backward. "Run, Julia." They burst out into the cool night air. Angela was waiting with a car. They were halfway across the lawn when Julia suddenly gasped, clutching her stomach and stumbling to her knees. "The baby, I think something's wrong." Together, they got her into the car. As Angela sped away from the estate, Julia's contractions began, sharp and fast. "It's too early," she moaned. "I'm only 7 months." "I'm sorry, Mom," Julia cried, clutching Martha's hand. I'm so sorry for shutting you out. Shoo, Martha soothed. None of that matters now. I don't know if I can do this, Julia whispered. You can, Martha's voice was firm. You're my daughter. You're stronger than you know. In the darkness of the car, speeding away from her prison, Julia looked at her mother. The blue house, she murmured, a small smile touching her lips. You remembered. I told you, didn't I? Martha whispered, kissing her forehead. I'll always meet you there. Angela's safe house was a rustic cabin where a trusted doctor was waiting. The stress had triggered labor. Hours later, as dawn broke, a tiny, reedy cry filled the room. A baby girl, small but fighting. I want to name her Hope, Julia said decisively, her eyes meeting her mother's. Hope Martha Thomas. Thomas? Martha questioned, her heart swelling. Never Wilson, Julia said firmly. She's a Thomas, like us. Strong, resilient, brave. The following weeks were a whirlwind. The case against Wilson Pharmaceuticals exploded into a national scandal. Faith was arrested trying to flee the country. Connor, after a desperate TV plea claiming Julia was mentally unstable, disappeared. Armed with Julia's testimony and the samples she had bravely collected, federal investigators dismantled the Wilson empire. One night, the apartment security system was breached. It was Connor, wild-eyed and armed. Where are they? He demanded. Where are my wife and child? Safe from you, Martha replied calmly, standing between him and the panic room where Julia and Hope were hidden. This is all your fault, he spat, his rage focusing on her. The cleaning woman who thinks she could destroy a Wilson. I'm not just a cleaning woman, Martha met his gaze, her voice ringing with power. I'm a mother. And you threatened my child. Before Connor could react, federal agents burst in, Angela at the lead. He was arrested, his legacy not one of scientific breakthrough, but of monstrous greed and abuse. 6 months later, Martha stood in the backyard of a modest but comfortable home, 2 states away from the life they had escaped. Julia was kneeling in a garden bed, showing 8-month-old Hope how to pat soil around a small maple sapling. This is a sugar maple, Julia explained to her daughter. When you're bigger, we can tap it for syrup. Hope babbled happily, her tiny hands covered in dirt. Martha watched them from the porch, her heart full. The Wilson case was over. Julia had started a support group for survivors of controlling relationships. Martha had opened a small bakery. It was a simple life, a good life. I have something for you, Julia said, handing Martha an envelope. Inside were legal papers. As Martha read them, tears filled her eyes. You're changing her name. Julia nodded. Hope Martha Thomas. Officially. No trace of Wilson left. You saved us, Mom. In every way a person can be saved. She should carry your name proudly. Martha gathered them both in her arms, 3 generations of Thomas women planting roots together. You know, Julia said softly, gesturing to their home with its blue siding and white trim, I think we finally found it, Mom. Martha looked at their small house, at the reflecting pond just beyond the garden, at her daughter and granddaughter bathed in the afternoon sunlight. After a lifetime of sacrifice, they had indeed found their blue house. They had found their way home. The maple sapling in their yard might take years to grow tall and strong, but they had time now. Time to heal, to laugh, to live. They had learned that true wealth isn't measured in dollars or carats, but in the fierce, unbreakable bonds of family. The love between a mother, a daughter, and a granddaughter, rooted in sacrifice and watered with resilience, had proven stronger than any fortune, stronger than any cage, and stronger, even, than fear itself. We hope this story touched your heart as much as it did ours. The power of a mother's love and the resilience of the human spirit are truly incredible forces. If you were moved by Martha and Julia's journey, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need a message of hope and redemption. What part of the story resonated with you the most? Let us know in the comments below. We love hearing from you. And for more powerful stories that inspire and uplift, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching.